Welcome, everyone. I'm Ryan Smith. This is ModX Network Voices. We're here with an industry expert today who has started new volumetric modular companies, Vaughan Buckley. And I'm always joined by my partner, Ivan Rupnik. Ivan, like to say hi?
Hi, Ryan. I'm Vaughan.
Yeah.
Morning.
Vaughan, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. What we're going to do is I'll introduce you briefly, and then if you could just share a little bit about yourself. And you've prepared some slides, which is great. Vaughan Buckley, we met a number of years ago. He joined us in Japan when we went to ModX Japan with a number of his employees, and real thought leader as well as entrepreneur in the space, doing some amazing things. So Vaughan, tell us a little bit about your story and what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah, we started modular construction as a builder in 2009. So we've been doing it for a little over 10 years now. The company originally started as a general contractor, mainly building projects for ourselves. It was speculative development, primarily townhomes and small single family product. And over time, we've evolved into the multifamily world.
That's great. And today, Vaughan's going to talk a little bit about that development of what we call a vertically integrated company in the volumetric modular space. So yeah, Vaughan, go right ahead and share some slides. That would be great.
We started VBC, as I said, in 2009, single family homes, producing a few houses a year. 2014, 2015, we started producing more multifamily product, and we now have a little over 240 employees in 5 states, and several different divisions, which were sort of generated out of our core values. Our core values have always been safety, quality, and efficiency. And the principles that surround them have required us to always be solving for our clients' needs and problems. And as a result of that, vertical integration really became our only path for a lot of the challenges that we were facing, because there just weren't service providers in the market that had solutions for a modular product to do what we needed to do to make our clients' product the product that they wanted to receive. So it started out with us, starting our own set crew and producing some of our own logistical support. Eventually that morphed into doing our own manufacturing and then our own architecture. So we now have 3 primary divisions: a general contracting firm in Philadelphia, our manufacturing facility in North Carolina, and an architectural and engineering studio in Boston. And each of those divisions have primary responsibilities, and they can work directly with clients, but they also form a chain together to become the volumetric building companies, where we can provide turnkey design build support to developers and investors in really a nationwide footprint. And so each of the divisions have grown substantially. VBC's had about 900% growth in the last 3 years. So we're constantly evolving and changing in the size and shape of our organization. Here's a quick example of some of the projects that we build out of our manufacturing facilities or as a general contractor and designer. Over the last few years, we've built, I suppose, somewhere in the range of 1,500 or so apartment units and varying shape and size buildings. But commonly speaking, the majority of the projects are now becoming larger podium buildings in urban environments. And the sophisticated buyers and developers that are purchasing and building buildings like this require a more robust sort of service, where they're not willing to go out and hire a set crew separately and hire a manufacturer separately to a builder and a GC. They want one contract. As one of our clients said, they want one throat to choke. And that is us. So we get to offer that service to our clients by bringing everything in-house. And what we found is that brings a lot more information in-house and brings a lot more support between our departments and our divisions that allows us to make sure we have a better, higher quality product and that we can fix some of those challenges that arise during offsite construction. So here's a characteristics comparison that we did for sort of the differences between volumetric modular in the construction industry and the manufacturing industry. And the result is that the volumetric industry is not really like any other industry. If you're comparing us on a straight characteristics comparison, you could say we're more closely related to manufacturing than we are to the construction industry. But those in the construction industry would argue that you are more construction than you are manufacturing. And so when you look at the talents, skills, systems, and procedures that hold organizations together in our industry, you find that there's really no right answers, and that there's no existing experience that creates this kind of industrial standardization. And as a result of that, vertical integration is the key that allows you to be less reliant on people, as most organizations, including ours, still are. You know, when you're trying to undertake these complex operations without a guidebook, you end up requiring people glue to hold everything together. You have to have really strong skills and really strong human resources to make a project work. But for this industry to industrialize properly, that people glue needs to be turned into a systems glue. And so part of the way that we're working towards achieving that within our organization is by bringing those pieces in-house. So this is a good example of where vertical integration affects factories and really has a huge impact on our ability to operate on large projects. So this is an example of any large multifamily factory and some of the things that can go wrong, the things that can stop the production line. And we're ordering them in two ways. At the top of the list, you have things that take very small amount of time to fix, and things that are very much inside the factory's control. And then as we go further down the list, we get to things that are outside the factory's control and things that take longer to fix. And when you're looking at most factories that are building multifamily construction, we've found that their daily costs, excluding material, range somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 to operate a large-scale multifamily facility for one business day. If we break that down to time, it's $1.50 a second on average is what it costs to run a factory. So if your dry event's out of stock, you're paying $1.50 a second until it comes back in. That's something that is very much inside the factory's control. It's a purchasing issue and it can be rectified. Untrained labor also needs to be rectified, but might take longer. But as you start to go down the list and things take longer and longer to sort out, those costs get higher and higher to the point where you can be at millions of dollars for a total project failure. If they call up one day and say, we don't want that multi-million-dollar building anymore. And the way that we have controlled these items is by sort of identifying what is in control of the factory and what is not. And when you look at this list, the majority of your errors are in control of somebody other than the manufacturer. So if the factory doesn't maintain control over that, whether it's internally or through joint ventures or outside resources that they have some form of control over, they can have major exposure to some of these risks. And a good example of that is when we're looking at engineering drawing errors and time to fix them or time to change something. Perhaps a system that wasn't designed properly for factory construction was designed for field construction. You have to ask yourself, does your architect respond in seconds? Can you measure your response time in seconds? And the answer is no. Architects that are not in-house don't respond to issues within seconds, which means that you need to somehow have that control internally or ensure that the drawings that you're getting are of the quality you need before they arrive. And all these other items that are on there as well. Contract delay, triggers, and logistics issues, they can all result in hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in damages to a factory. So we've overcome that by maintaining control of everything. So this is an example of how vertical integration is affecting us in our information flow. we have a traditional model right now in our industry primarily that results in architects and engineers producing drawings in CAD. They go to general contractors who build the building and order the modules. And once the information gets to the GC and the GC finds defects, they either send it back to the architect for revision, or in a lot of cases, they fix it on site themselves and that information goes nowhere. The architect doesn't know that there was a problem. The client doesn't know that there was a problem. The GC just says, well, that detail doesn't work, I'll fix it. That's not so easy in a factory, because in the factory we have to follow those drawings exactly. We've got third-party inspectors that are going to be there, and if that error makes it through the factory and gets to the field, that's even worse, because at that point the cost to correct is way higher, and that's why we work with a different loop. We try and engage on every project an architect in our in-house that's responsible for the modular components and coordinates with both the field and the factory, and that everything has to go back to a single source of truth, and that's the BIM model. In our case, we use Revit, and everything has to get back into that model to ensure that the coordination between all of these other players is correct. Our field and our factory coordinate in a BIM 360 docs program where we can interact with drawings that are directly tied back to the model. And it eliminates the current issue in our industry where we have an architectural set of plans that is then redrawn in shop drawing format by the factories, and then once again adjusted before it gets to the field. So it just creates a lot of challenges, and we've solve that in at least in our firm by bringing the architect and engineering in-house, which I think is a big part of the vertical integration's success. So another item that we have that is a big deal for us is supply chain. We see that when you're talking about vertically integrating successfully, that supply chain can be a huge part of your success or failure. And we have two major issues with that currently. One is the term value engineering has fast become a term that just means budget cutting. And so we sort of define value engineering as something that increases quality and reduces cost. And if it reduces cost and reduces quality, it's just budget cutting. And if it increases quality and increases price, then it's value adding. But really, we've got to value engineer, which is reducing price while simultaneously increasing the quality. And our approach to doing this was by creating product standards within our company. So except for the furniture and some of the accessories in here, everything you see in these pictures is a VBC product called VMX. That is a brand that we have created that we utilize to produce our own componentry, everything from faucetry and cabinets to mirrors and doors. And by offering our clients a standard product that's of a high enough quality level that they don't feel the need to have a custom architectural product specified, we can result in just a higher quality product with a lower cost to our client. And I think that's really been a big key for us in the value engineering and vertical integration world.
Vaughan, are you sourcing those materials from preferred providers or unique contracts, or are you in fact trying to pull back in the supply chain and actually manage the manufacturing of those fixtures and products that go into your projects?
So we have both. We produce our own product in some cases. In others, we do OEM and ODM variants through existing manufacturers. And then we have some national partnerships with brands that everybody knows that are producing components that we feel good about putting in all of our product. But the vast majority of the finished goods are our own internal brand, which is essentially a white label product that we can provide both to ourselves and even to our clients. A lot of the times our clients who are building site-built buildings will use our VMX products for the site components as well as putting them in the modules.
Great. Thanks, Vaughn, for sharing your road to vertical integration. And I have to say, Vaughn, if you didn't exist, we'd have to make you up as researchers. And I don't put that lightly. We've been doing that for the last 10 years. And Ryan's been doing that for longer. In fact, people in the academy who have been studying this field have been saying, car industries are vertically integrated. Look at the value they bring. We've been traveling around the world with you, looking at places like Japan and Sweden, where it's just business as usual to say if you're going to spend a lot of money in capital intensive investment into a factory, you're going to want to control that product. And then even in the US, we have Katera appearing on the scene in 2017, 2018 saying, well, okay, with a large amount of money from a big Japanese bank, you can do what people have been doing in manufacturing in the US and what have been doing in most offsite industry across the world, but not in the US for quite a long time. And so again, it's really exciting to see a model. I mean, it's really for us as academics and as researchers, it's so pure in the sense that you are in the middle of the modular belt where everyone was making single family homes and trailer wides for a long time and shifted to multifamily reluctantly, while at the same time rejecting vertical integration and automation. Really, we've seen Katera do it successfully, even again, using a lot of money. But you've done it in a much more sort of, again, step-by-step process over the last 10 years. So my first question is, how come vertical integration is not a common business practice in the volumetric modular industry today? Or at least in Pennsylvania, where you're even in your home turf, where a quarter of the industry supposedly resides.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that it's really hard. And I don't mean to suggest that we can do it any better than others can. I mean to suggest that in the sense that you have to bring together a really unique variety of skills to make it work. And we've been very lucky to find leaders in these varying market segments that have been excited about the vision and the mission of VBC and have jumped on board to help us support that. So when you step back, even though we're a really vertically integrated company, you could also suggest we're really 4 or 5 or 6 independently run organizations under a single umbrella that integrates well with each other, but you have to have those subject matter experts and those leaders and those visionaries in each of those divisions to bring them forward, while also ensuring that they're sort of selfless enough to bring it back in with all of the other divisions and improve the quality of the overall. And I think it's tough.
So the challenge is bringing the team together, but I mean, again, you've shown that you can do it with relatively. I mean, can you talk a little bit about? I know you shared a little bit of that process at other times. I don't know how comfortable you are sharing it, but how have you financed and how have you managed the risk of this kind of investment over time? As much as you're willing to, share, we understand some of those things are sensitive. But how have you financed this? How have you all these incremental steps from a modular builder to a modular manufacturer to someone who was acquired a design practice, someone who really started to go up the supply chain? How have you approached the financing of that? That's something that always comes up when we bring up these issues. Yes, it's hard to do, but also it's expensive. It seems to be expensive to do.
Yeah. No, it is expensive. You're right.
It is actually.
But, I think that the short answer is organically over a 10-year period. And when we look back, for example, I started our general contracting company in 2009 on credit cards. So there was no pool of money to pull from. And we successfully built some smaller projects that got us a little bit of money that got us a little more projects. But, when we go back and evaluate, I mean, in our first year of business in 2009, we did a little under $200,000 in revenue. We do that today in about 6 hours. So it's just, the growth trajectory is pretty significant, and it's a direct result of reinvestment in the businesses. Everything that the business has generated over the last 10 years is back in the business. And you can see it. You can see it in each of the divisions as they grow, and as we get a large deal or we successfully complete something that was a new record. There's it's not necessarily fancy new office furniture. It's a reinvestment in a business model that makes sense. And we see what we need to do here. And we have a huge amount of really committed team members that are putting everything they've got into making sure that the company can continue to be sustainable and successful. In the last year, we've taken in our first outside investors. So we've never had outside investors before. When we decided to buy the factory in North Carolina, we thought that it was time, having a factory and the balance sheet that goes along with it, to procure some outside investment. And the way that we approached that was to go to our developers and investors that were already our clients. And we offered the opportunity for them to get involved as a real estate deal primarily. We said, this is something that you can invest in, but it's also an insurance policy. By investing in us and investing in the facility that is going to produce the modules, we can guarantee that you have priority to the modules that business will output. And that's very important in a market like today's, where there's high volatility and also high demand. And, people want to know that they can get the supply they need from the supplier they want. So to be able to go to our existing developers and say, hey, would you like to get on board here? That has worked wonderfully. I mean, the majority of them are on our board of directors. There's also something to be said for being able to have your board of directors talking to each other about their own business. So when someone says, oh, my job's getting delayed 3 months, everyone else says, well, what are you going to do about it? We have to keep the factory running. So there's some accountability there as well, and camaraderie and support. And so we have no venture capital money. We have no outside straight investor dollars. We have our clients investing in the business.
Great.
This is really great to hear. And related to vertical integration, Vaughan, how would you place the role of, so Ivan and I are architects by training, although we practice a little bit. Our everyday is mostly academic work. But what is the role of the architect, i.e. what is the role of design in this vertically integrated process? And what is the value of that to the total value chain of a project, for example?
Yeah, design is and will always be, in my opinion, the most important aspect of success in any construction project. And I think that's only amplified when you take that construction project and build it in a factory. So design is always key. And, our vertically integrated firm does not have the only answer to design. There are so many talented architects out there that can produce modular buildings. But the way that we've chosen to interact is that we would prefer to nest in with an existing architect. We don't want to take their business. We don't want to change the way that architecture is built. We want to change the way that housing is built and the way that it's ordered. We need to convert modules from being a service or a construction contract to being a product. And to make that adjustment, we have to, as the product maker, take responsibility for the design and success of those components. It's probably one of the biggest reasons why modular hasn't caught on large multifamily buildings, is that architects are scared to take on that liability for components that they're not reviewing, administering, or controlling. In an environment that may not have even been selected yet. So they're saying, we're trying to design a modular building for a factory that hasn't even been chosen. How are we supposed to make sure our details match theirs? And the short answer is they don't. So we need to better integrate the design build function of manufacturing at the back end of a process into the front end design.
And when you say design, because we've even had this confusion with architects, you're not just talking about quote unquote the way it looks. You're talking about the way it's designed ergonomically in terms of manufacturing. Just to make that clear, we know what that means, but we've been surprised how much people think it's about a particular facade or flavor. No, it's clearly, if you're going to be manufacturing something, it actually needs to be designed before you make those decisions, which surprisingly is something that the industry still needs to hear.
Right.
The other thing I also wanted to, and then the other thing is, I think we all agree with your emphasis on having that it's a product. On the other hand, we've seen that many of your quote unquote competitors, none of whom offer this kind of vertical integration, also think of modules as products in the sense that they're manufacturers of mods, but not manufacturers of buildings. And so you're talking about the product being a building or a space you can use, not a mod you can sell. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think the differentiation there is that a product, that there's original, manufacturing tenets regarding product creation of, here's some plans, you go build this for me. does that make that person a manufacturer? And I think the answer is not really. It makes them a service provider or a contractor that's producing some drawings that were really created by someone else. To be a manufacturer, you have to be in control of what is on your production line. And I think that that's really, really important. And our, as you called them, competitors, as I'll call them, sort of contemporaries, are really doing an amazing job of taking these really complex architectural plans and figuring out how to force feed them down their production line. My hats are off to them, because we couldn't be as successful as we are doing the way that they're doing it. We just couldn't do that kind of workload. So, we're really trying to say, how do we integrate that back into the product for things like you just mentioned when you're making your analysis between the two types of design. Affordable housing regulations, for example, they have some requirements, things like height limits to doors and closets. So I have a process and a production line where we have 7-foot doors. Every door in the building is 7 foot. That's part of our VMX line. It's part of our process for all our walls are the same dimensions, all our openings are the same size. But if we want to build affordable housing, we have to make a door 6 inches shorter, because that's the maximum height door you can put on a closet in an affordable housing unit in Pennsylvania. That doesn't make any sense. But that's a part of the design function. And when we start talking about everything from as simple as mate line unit widths between modules, we have some architects that say, I've estimated, say, 8 inches for the module mate line. And you say, okay, that's great. That's the good size. But how are we holding the building down? Are there threaded rods that need to fit in that space? Are there straps that are going to go in? What are your mechanical connections, and how are our shear walls going together? That inch or inch and a half may not sound like a big deal, but on a 500 unit building, it's 1,000 square feet and you've lost your ADA clearances. So let's investigate manufacturing before we get too far into design.
That's what you mean by design. And now that you brought up affordable housing and regulation, we can't help but go there too, because again, you've shown, a really innovative approach to incrementally moving towards an integrated company. What else, but what we've seen in other countries, again, now that you've gotten here, the next step is to say, what does HUD need to do? What do building suppliers need to do? What needs to change? You've taken what we know and love about the biggest volumetric modular industry in the world, which is the U.S. industry, for better or for worse. What are the next steps? Like, what are some lobbying needs to get done? What does the supply chain need to do? How do we deal with chipboard as a bottleneck for volumetric modular? What are some things that you see, down the road, bigger industry-wide changes that need to happen now that you've sort of really optimized a lot of what we understand as the project delivery of volumetric to be?
Right. I think supply chain needs to really think about what they want to be in the future. A lot of the supply chain manufacturers and vendors have become commoditized, right? Drywall, lumber, these things that are just so easy to produce, and they have a unit cost, and the market goes up and down, but I know that I can always build it and sell it. Mm-hmm. They've gotten themselves into a place where by commoditizing their products, they can't add value. They can't value engineer that product for us. For example, all sheet goods are 4x8 because they can be carried by 2 people and fit around a doorway in a building. We don't need that in a factory. We're perfectly comfortable taking 60-foot sheets because we can lift it with whatever we like. And when you have those discussions with a lot of commodity suppliers, they say, well, that doesn't work for us because our 2 cents a square foot that we charge for this material won't work on a 60-foot sheet. And we have to say, hold on, we can pay more than 2 cents. You start to add value to the product and allow us to move things in ways that haven't been done before. And all of a sudden, drywall that for the last 10 years has been a square foot cost per inch, all of a sudden you've opened an entire new market. If you can eliminate fasteners, if you can eliminate seams, if you can eliminate painting and dry time, you can triple the value of drywall, or a drywall alternative, which we're still hoping for here soon. But there are other ways that manufacturers can approach product once it gets into a factory. And there are now enough factories in the country working together that we can say, no, as a group, we need to do better.
Maybe we could.
On the regulatory. Oh, sorry, Ryan. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was going to say maybe we could round out this conversation in the interest of time. One, to talk about what you just touched on, Vaughan, which is your coalition and how that could leverage that supply chain and provide demand. And then the second is just what are some things you're currently working on? What are some tech that you're trying to imbue in your company to increase its efficiency and look at productivity? That would be helpful to maybe finish out with those two.
Sure. There's a few different things we're working on right now. We have some interesting partnerships with some technology companies and also a couple of different universities that are working on AI products in the factory, where cameras will recognize our team members and determine extra steps that they might be taking or other things that are in our process that might be inefficient. We also are working on some of the front end systems. What we're seeing now is we have enough experience in producing product that everybody that builds apartment buildings thinks they have a really special apartment that's their apartment that they've designed, but really it looks just like every other apartment that's ever been designed. So the question is, how can we commoditize a product around those designs and help buyers have a quicker, leaner, meaner estimate and quicker, leaner, meaner plan and design process by creating building blocks for them. And so over the next few months to year, you'll see us producing many more standardized components, which can be tweaked and adjusted to ensure that they're suitable for a particular client's needs, but ultimately are using a similar chassis to the rest of the apartments that are built.
That's great. And then in the interest of time, we have to close out the conversation. Although with Vaughan, you could probably talk 3 hours and still just touch the surface. So I want to thank you for really appreciate the partnership and collaboration over time. And how can people get a hold of you, Vaughan? What's the best way if they have a project or want to learn more?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is such a great tool these days. So, sharing on our company page on LinkedIn, our updates, as well as you're always welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's a great place to share the news of the world.
Great. And with this post on YouTube and the ModX network, we will have some links to Vaughan's company and the Modular Coalition that you can follow. With that, I want to thank Vaughan Buckley, Ivan Rupnik, and we'll see everyone next time. Thank you.
Thanks.